Hey everybody, my name is Jim Farmer. I am the festival director of Out on Film. Thank you all for joining us this year. This is our 34th year of bringing you films for, by, and about our community and its allies. This, however, is our first year as a hybrid film festival where we have some films in theater and more films online. So there's a lot of programming for you to choose from. Today is actually the Sharon Lewis Film Festival. We have two films from Sharon Lewis. So thank you all. Thank you, Sharon Lewis, for bringing these to us. This particular Q&A is about With Wonder. I do want to talk to you about Disruptor Conductor as well. And I'm going to read a description of With Wonder, and then I'm going to ask you all some questions and let you introduce yourselves. Born out of director Sharon Lewis's muted struggle with not fitting into neat racial, queer, Christian boxes, With Wonder takes an intimate look at the journey of members of the queer Christian community of color and their attempts to answer the question, can you be Christian and queer? So I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves, and then we're going to jump into some questions.
So I'm Sharon Lewis. I'm the director of With Wonder, and I'll throw it over to you.
Serena?
Oh, did you say Serena? I couldn't hear what you
Okay.
said. Oh, okay. Hi, my name is Serena. My pronouns are she, her. I'm coming from San Jose, California.
Oh, great.
Winnie.
Hi, my name is Winnie Vargehese, and I'm the rector of St. Luke's Church, which is in Atlanta. Glad to be here.
Hey everybody, I'm D'Lo. I go by he or they. I'm in LA and I'm an actor, writer, comic.
Okay. Thank you all again for sharing this documentary. It's an extraordinary documentary. I'm so happy to be sharing it with our audience. Sharon, I just have to start with you. I mean, what made you, obviously this is very personal, but what made you want to try to tackle this subject in a documentary?
Well, I had just finished Disruptor Conductor, which is about the first openly gay Black conductor in Canada. He was putting on the first orchestral drag show in Canada. And so I got to know him really well, and we started talking about conversion therapy and experiences with conversion therapy. And so the documentary With Wonder started out about that, talking about conversion therapy. And what I felt like was when I spoke to the participants and when I started sort of gleaning their stories, that the essential question seemed to be whether or not you could be queer and Christian. And I guess could you be queer, Christian, and happy? You know, that's the other part of that question. So that felt like the essential question that needed to be answered and explored. And the other thing is, a whole bunch of Hollywood movies came out about conversion therapy. And I was just like, I just wanted something hopeful rather than, you know, with the constant, like we're seen as victims and seen as not happy. So I wanted to kind of present something for us as opposed to for other.
Thank you for that. How did you go about finding all of your subjects?
Well, it's interesting. Everybody had sort of a personal connection to, except for Serena. And I hunted Serena down. I was going to San Francisco to shoot parts of Disruptor Conductor. And I found her on Facebook, and I saw the work that she was doing. So I stalked her. That's what I did. I mean, right, Serena? Didn't I just kind of reach out to you out of the blue?
Yeah, I was just, you know, I was trying to remember. This was a while ago. I'm like, how did we get in touch? Because we didn't know each other prior to this. And I think it was because I was part of the Progressive Asian American Christians group. And maybe you got connected to that and then asked like if there was somebody, and then they gave you my name. And I had so the Progressive Asian American Christians group on Facebook is about 7,000 members strong. And then within that group, we have a subgroup specifically for queer folks. So we call it PAC Family, the PAAC family. And I helped lead that, and we have about almost 600 members in that group. And so I think that's how we got connected. But yeah.
And then we invaded her. I thought it was your home, but it was your cousin's home.
It was my cousin's house. Yeah, because you were in the city in San Francisco, and then I was in San Jose. And then my cousin very graciously offered up their house. I know they weren't even there. I don't think you even met them, but they have a beautiful home. And yeah, right by Land's End in the city.
But it was beautiful because Serena, I felt like I hadn't known her before. I only had a day, so I sort of came in there with a crew, and her wife was there, Nemo, her little boy was there, and I felt like you opened up and really risked trusting me with your story and your viewpoints, and that's what happened in that day. So that was a day in the life of Serena.
Okay.
Yeah.
I do want to get to more of the subjects in a moment, but I do want to ask you, Shem, because what I particularly liked about this film is that you cover Jamaica and New York, London, and LA. Can you just sort of talk about the decision to cover all of those?
Yeah, what's interesting is when you are BIPOC, it doesn't have to not necessarily be a decision to do BIPOC. It's what you're connected to. So we kept doing all these interviews, and then there were a couple of interviews that were not of the BIPOC family, and we it naturally, myself and the producer and the editors kind of went, this feels like it needs to be about us because there are very specific experiences that we have in being queer and Christian, or queer and Christian questioning, or queer and Christian committed and not committed, and being BIPOC. It was a really different experience. And even talking about Christianity and colonialism, which, the documentary only got to kind of hint at, but that is a huge topic in itself. And I'll say this, Reverend Winnie is the one that sort of, I feel like this doc was allowing me to come out of the closet as Christian. I'm still not super comfortable with that term, but that's what that doc was from. I'm like, can I be political and Christian? But Winnie is.
Okay. So I want to talk to the subject and just, people have already seen this film. Just if you could just talk briefly about, how each of you reconcile, being Christian, queer, and BIPOC, and how difficult that can be. And we'll start with Serena.
It's definitely for me, I'll speak personally for me, it was definitely a journey. When I was coming out to myself, it took a while. I came out when I was a little bit later, when I was a little older, like in my late 20s. And I never felt like my relationship with God was compromised in any way. I think my fear and shame of when I came out was more stemmed from, am I going to hurt my parents and all the people that I've led in ministry? I used to preach and lead worship, all this stuff, like what, because you're not supposed to, lead others astray, right? Is this gonna lead others astray? Is it gonna make them compromise their faith? And then it's like, this is my parents' livelihood. What are they gonna do? Their only child is a total homo. Like, what's gonna happen? So yeah, it was difficult with that, but I think, and Sharon, I totally relate with you about being in the closet, about being Christian. So when I started coming out and building my community in the queer community, I had to really keep that side of me about being used to being in like ministry and being a Christian, kind of in the closet in that environment. And so I never really felt fully myself anywhere. So but then it took a long time, and it was about meeting other queer Christians. The first time I went to this one conference called, back then it was called the Gay Christian Network Conference. Now it's called QCF, a Q Christian Fellowship, I believe. The first one I went to was in Portland, and my wife was like really encouraging me to go. I never even knew this existed. And this conference is like several thousand folks. And when I went, it was like, oh my God, these are my people. Like, these are like truly my people. Like, we are queer, we are Christian. It was a little hella white still back then. I think they're doing a little bit better now. But it's I think just at least crossing that divide of like being queer and being Christian and seeing all of us in one place. And there was this one message that Pastor Danny Cortez spoke. He was one of the keynotes, and he was talking about his journey about coming out as being affirming. And he said at one point, like, I, on behalf of all like lay people and clergy, like I'm sorry. And you could just feel like something broke in that room of thousands of folks there, that it was a big rush. You could feel the spirit moving so heavily, because at that moment, people's hearts were being mended and healed, because all they wanted to hear was, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what we've done as a church, as an institution, as individuals, that we've hurt you and that we have not validated your existence. And that just simple, I'm sorry, like so many people just needed to hear that. And I felt like that was a real big turning point for me as far as like reconciling my faith and my queerness and bringing that all together, and also allowing me to continue on ministry. Because before I just felt like I couldn't serve in ministry anymore because I'm gay. But that really opened the door for me to being like, no, Serena, this was and still is your calling, to serve in ministry and to minister to others. So it's just not the way that maybe your parents had envisioned it for you. So this is maybe the way that God envisioned it for you.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Reverend Winnie.
Serena, thank you. That's powerful. I come from a different part of the Christian community. And so I'm an Episcopal priest, and I grew up in the main line, and my parents are immigrants. And because of that, the way I would think about this is, one, as an immigrant, there is no place where we fit completely, right? Part of the church tradition that I come from is not, because it's not evangelical, would be heavily critiqued in the places that I grew up. There was which was more, I grew up in Dallas, Texas, so more a Bible Belt. And so from the beginning, I had a really profound sense, it feels like a gift to me, that the church was not my faith, that God was greater than the church. And the church did the best it could. It was so clear in our immigrant church that the church was doing the best it could, but it really wasn't making it in all kinds of ways. And also true around us that the church is problematic. And so when I came out at 17, it never occurred to me that it was a problem of faith or of God or of me. I did know the church had a problem with that. And looking back, I was 17 at the time and pretty idealistic. What a gift in my life that I immediately named that as a church problem, an institution problem, maybe my family's problem, but nothing to do with me or with God. And a God that I would have said at that point, I wasn't really sure I believed in. I wasn't sure how that worked and what it would mean to be a Christian. And I've been really fortunate in how I've come through as a Christian person and pursued ordination and worked in the Episcopal Church, that as the church was moving towards more and more inclusion, I had always been able to be myself within it. And so as the church wanted to be more inclusive of LGBTQI plus people, is working on it, I could be someone saying, this is how you do it. And this is how we do it as people that are there and not broken by it, not hurt by the church. And I feel like in some ways we're the first generation of that in the Episcopal Church. So I've never seen a contradiction in it in my faith, but I've definitely seen that it would bring tension into these exterior institutions that I highly value and I work within. And that I always felt like it was part of my responsibility to be about changing and making more their true selves.
Okay. All right.
I am not a Christian. I don't say that I am, but I grew up going to Christian school. And so I did pray a lot to Jesus and his Father and the Holy Spirit. And but in Hinduism, there's not really anything that says that queerness is bad. It's more of a cultural sort of thing, like that, just don't be queer. But when I first heard I remember I was in the 4th grade at my Baptist school, and I had already accepted Jesus into my heart 2 times as insurance. And I was like, my 4th grade teacher talked about hiring homosexuals, like what would become of the day, like what would become of the school if they had to hire homosexual teachers. And I was like, homosexual, and then she explained what that meant, and then just for the quickest second I was like, technically that's what I am, even though I felt like a boy inside. And I was like, oh my God, it's a sin. This is a sin. And I kept thinking about sin. And because I was already being schooled at a very young age about sin, because I had gone to the Baptist school since I was like 4.
Okay.
So I kept praying about just not trying to change me, but not trying to change. I prayed more to be turned into a boy than I did ever about not having these feelings. And I think it was like Winnie said, like, what a gift at 17 to know that it wasn't you, that something else was wrong. And to know that you were, that inside that I knew that I was good and that I didn't hurt people. And that was enough to let me know at a young age in my little head that I deserved to live without being called like this outright bad person, a sinner, you know?
Sure.
And I think that I just kind of stuck with that mode, but it did make me question everything about all religions because I felt like every time that I would hear people who were grappling with their sexuality and religion, it was on some horrible like Maury Povich or like Jerry Springer show. But I was like, these are good people. Like, what's up? Like, and so just questioning that at a young age was what allowed me to sort of land on a spot where I was like, oh, nobody knows anything, and people are just opinionated. Yeah.
And I just want to answer that question, Jim, when you were saying or asking about BIPOC, because there's all of these issues about coming out, and then there's all of the issues about questioning Christianity, and then the colonialists, like, am I taking on a colonialist religion? But then there's also the immigrant family experience that adds an extra weight where you already don't belong or feel like you don't belong, whether you're first or second generation, and don't have that privilege to come out. And when all the sort of hopes and dreams of the family are resting on you. You know what I mean?
And also just to add to that, as far as like the immigrant community, it's like you're going to be bringing on this shame onto your family, and you're going to make them outcasted within already of a marginalized group. So there's this fear, like even if you come out to your parents, a lot of times, like some friends of mine, their parents are just like, just don't tell anybody, because they don't want to be ostracized within their own very small community already, so it's already tough. It's like, don't make it harder.
Yeah, and there's a vulnerability, right? There's a vulnerability there that, you could be expelled.
Exactly.
In a real way.
Exactly. Yeah. When you appear in a documentary like this, the documentary is out there for everybody in the world to see. Was there any hesitation on this subject's parts to be in here and to tell your story, knowing that it would be out there for the rest of your lives?
I can say on the interview side, the biggest concern, I think, for some of the participants in Jamaica was safety.
Sure.
Safety was a real concern.
I can imagine.
Physical safety, and again, 2 participants came from very small communities in rural Jamaica, so there was a real threat in that way of not having a community to connect to. But I'll also say what I think all the participants shared with me in one way or another was this idea of making sure that we are also not painting their families as this big monolith of really bad people. And that's what I really wanted to attempt to do in this documentary, is to give you some complexity. When D'Lo shares about his mom, for me, that part is so touching because I get a real sense of his mom as a full, loving human being, both, his mom and his dad. And the same thing with Serena's parents, that it came from a place of love and understanding. It's not coming from a place of, and it's coming from a real fear that bad is going to befall your children. So it comes from love.
Okay. Sharon, you mentioned this a few minutes ago, but you said you had seen a lot of films, projects on conversion therapy, and you didn't want this to be a horrific vision. You wanted there to be some optimism, and obviously there's some struggles in this film with all the subjects and what they're going through professionally, personally, but there is a lot of optimism, and there's hope, and there's beauty in this. Can you all just talk about that? And I guess maybe that will segue into the fact that I know that when I was growing up, I saw very few images on TV that were positive. I grew up in an era where, all the gay men that I saw were either murdered or they were dying with AIDS, and things are getting better. But can you just talk about representation and why it's important to have happiness and positive images in this film? And I'd like to hear from all of you if I can.
Well, D'Lo, I know you use comedy, to bring that positivity and hope for really tough subjects.
Yeah, I think that a lot of the most beautiful things about this documentary were just in in the individuals first and foremost. But also, I think that there's a lightness to every single one of these people who walk with such, or who have walked with the heavy, you know what I'm saying? And I think that just showed, like, you don't have to search for that with these individuals or with many queer people. It's that resilience, that queer people have, and I think that is what is so gorgeous about the documentary as well, because while there's so much pain there, there's just so much hope and so much love, like so much tremendous love, like not just for their families, for the individuals and their families, but for the community at large, and the work that gets done and the community building and et cetera. Like every single person is amazing. They're all fucking gods,
And I can tell you, when I was doing this documentary, one of the parts, I mean, we had trouble cutting anything out, but Serena and Melissa's wedding, like all those beautiful pictures. And then we had all this slow-mo, Serena and Melissa and Nemo, and like it went on and on and on. You know what I mean? And we had to like cut that down. But it was because when we get to that, there's such love and beauty and hope and family. And every time we got to that part, because we were sort of going up and down in the journeys, all of us was sort of, who were working on it, were just like, because it was so beautiful.
I want to get some of that footage from you.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
yay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there was a part of the documentary too, where Winnie was preaching, which we also had to cut down because literally it was like 6 hours, where she was talking about creation. And so we had, we were cutting to all the people in the church, and we had all these beautiful images. And but that part where Winnie, for me, when Winnie speaks about, I knew at that point that I was free. So like coming out and being a priest at the same time brought freedom is always another point where I feel, anyway, I'm speaking for you guys.
I don't know how y'all did this in making the film, but part of what it felt like to me is as people were telling their stories, they were rooted and grounded in the communities and families that they were talking about. It felt really, often when you hear about queer folks of color, it's one or two, and it's within a larger context of whatever is considered the norm in the space that they're in. And this it was a different gaze, right? And you can tell, and it's rooted in a very different way. And that in and of itself is beautiful. And some of the connections to people you make, I was looking through, like, I know that person. I've actually worked on a project with that person, and we didn't talk about any of that. So to find these remarkable people really across the planet that have light touch connections to each other and are building beautiful things, frankly, as much as we tell painful stories of our past, are building really beautiful communities, and some for a very long time, right?
Sure. Reverend Winnie, I'd love to ask you about your own experience moving from New York to Atlanta and what that's been like for you.
So I lived in Atlanta almost 30 years ago for a few years, and I came out in Atlanta, and it's really different than it was in 1989 to be in Atlanta. Yeah. And we're in a neighborhood that you would not have guessed that my spouse and I would have comfortably lived in, or frankly been welcomed in, even in 1989. I'm the rector of a church that I think couldn't have imagined someone like me in leadership at that point. So I feel like I'm a very different person at this point, but this city is a really different place. I feel like I see queer people everywhere. It's a majority people of color city. I forgot about that, and that's just delightful. Yeah, but it's a big gay city. Who knew? I didn't know. So I'm really happy to be here. It rains a lot.
It rains. It's like the eastern coast of Seattle. It really is. But I wanted to ask you this. Obviously, COVID has had an effect on the industry, films, filmmakers. Have you had the opportunity yet to have a any kind of in-person premiere where you all can get together and see this with an audience? And I mean, I just imagine, I mean, this film is very powerful watching it, by yourself in your living room or your office. But I imagine seeing this in a theater with all of you there with other people, just experience this must just be an overwhelming experience. Have you had the chance to do that yet?
No, what's tough is that we had a sort of private screening for ourselves.
Okay.
No one's talked or seen each other since I invaded their lives. So we had that, and I found it incredibly powerful and emotional
Mhm.
to be able to see everybody together on screen on Zoom. But it also made me really, really miss that idea of community with film, because obviously as a filmmaker, that lifts me when I get to be in a room full of audience and as a filmmaker, and get to actually experience and look over, hopefully somebody enjoying the film, even if they're not enjoying it, getting to actually have that community experience. Actually, I take that back, only if they're enjoying it.
Yeah, I hope that there's an opportunity moving forward for this to play in a lot of festivals and bring you all together. Have all three of you met?
I don't know it. No, right?
Okay.
D'Lo, you've never met Serena. I mean, D'Lo and Winnie know.
Winnie, yeah.
No, I
Yeah.
haven't met
No, I don't
anybody.
think Serena, you've met anybody, right?
No, but I'm sure we have friends in common.
Yeah.
I feel like we probably do. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
That's why I think it's cool, Jim, that you're playing this film in Atlanta. It says something like what Winnie was saying is that, I've been to Atlanta as well, and a long time ago. And the idea that this film is playing, and also that Winnie, you feel like Atlanta is like a gay city, and you're coming from New York. So that says a lot, how much it's changed. And I don't know if it's still, because it's been a while, if it's still that segregated kind of feeling going on, is it? And are you finding that in the festival?
I'd be curious to see what you think, Dr. Winnie.
It's a good question. Yes, it's segregated, absolutely, and that's changing. I'm definitely living in a neighborhood I would not have actually, frankly, even wanted to live in
Yeah.
back, a little while ago, and I think that's changing a lot. The city is changing for good and for bad, right? That all of this new industry is coming in, so that's changing things in certain ways. But I think one of the things that I thought was interesting about the city of Atlanta is that it's actually wrestling with that. We'll see where we land, right? But
Okay.
what does it look like to get that right? And housing and all kinds of other issues.
Yeah,
So yeah,
housing is a
it
serious.
actually doesn't surprise me for the city that I've seen that this is in this festival.
Exactly. So I would ask one final question. What's next for the film, and then where can people see this film or get more information about this film moving forward?
Yeah, so the next place, so this is its world premiere, is in Atlanta. Yes, I
Excited.
know, which is exciting for us too. And then it's going to Toronto right after this.
Oh, nice.
So it's premiering in Toronto, and then it's going to Kenya.
Oh, wow.
Going to a Kenyan film festival, we just actually, maybe a day ago, got the request
Mhm.
through Reverend G-Day. It was
Okay.
a connection with Reverend G-Day. So
Yeah.
that's sort of the life so far, but it'll continue. Our hope eventually, and my hope eventually, is that it gets into churches and rural places, because there aren't film festivals there, and there are a lot of people that can't get to those film festivals.
Mhm.
And I would love for it to be in those smaller communities. That's really my big hope, where they don't have that necessarily the resources
Yeah.
for support.
Thank you all for sharing this beautiful film with our audience. I think our audience is truly going to love it. Sharon, congratulations on Disruptor Conductor as well, which is a double feature with this, so people can watch both of your films. So thank you all for joining us today for a great Q&A, and I wish you luck moving forward with the film.
Thank you so much, Jim. Thanks for having a little Sharon Fest with the both films. Appreciate that.
No, it worked out. I mean, it's like, we'd seen this film and loved it. You submitted this, is like, let's just do this. It worked out really, really well. So thanks so much for your flexibility, and thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye. Bye, everyone.